welcome back to my channel. I have been sitting on this review of Onyx Storm for about a week. I wanted it to marinate so that I could really process and think through what I have read. And unfortunately, I think I am gonna hurt some of your feelings. When I say that Onyx Storm was the most anticipated read for me this year, I have been foaming at the mouth waiting for this book to come out. A week before Onyx Storm actually came out, I was literally so anxious that I was losing sleep. So I'm feeling very passionate about my review today, and unfortunately I am gonna have to spoil everything that has happened, or at least the things that frustrated me the most, because there is no way that I can properly explain to you how much this book was such a letdown without going into specific details and context. So, okay, anyway, I'm about to get into my review because I'm literally shaking with anticipation. So just like a recap, we know at the end of Iron Flame that obviously the big cliffhanger was that Xaden is now Venom, which was sad for the masses of those who love Xaden. So I was really excited for this book because not only did we find out that Andarna is the 7th breed of dragon, which we haven't seen in years and years and years, which is very interesting and fun. We also are trying to figure out how to cure Venom, and that could possibly cure the war, if you will. I wasn't expecting this to be the best book in the series, but I didn't expect it to be so anticlimactic as it was. So let me just go ahead and start out with a few things that frustrated me the most about Onyx Storm. Rebecca Yarros, for some reason, decided that she wanted to throw in every single minor character she could possibly think of all into like one melting pot and not give the reader any context of who we are speaking to. There's actually a chapter, I believe it was in chapter 5, there was a scene where a group of writers were like ganging up on a bunch of flyers, and then Violet and her crew came in and like tried to like de-escalate the situation. Well, it ended up being like they were like challenging each other, yada yada. It was a whole lot. I'm going to list the names of characters that were name dropped in this singular chapter, and I want you to kind of really hard and think and try to remember if any of these ring a bell. Okay. I'm also probably gonna botch some of these names, by the way, but let's just move forward. Avalyn, Baylor, Kai, who apparently are in a love triangle. Who are they and why do I care? Aura, or Aura, Kaven, Ewan Faber, Devira, Caroline, Emeterio? Definitely botched that one for sure. Let's just say this. If Rebecca names dropped one character one singular time, or one territory one singular time in the, don't worry, I calculated it, 487,630 words that she has written throughout the 3 books that she's come out with, if she's mentioned them once, she's also expecting you to remember every single detail of that character and who they're where they're from and who they are and why they're important. But as I said, some of these characters were actually not important at all. They were name dropped once and then we never heard from them again. So I'm not really understanding the need to add all these side characters when we're already overwhelmed with not only the writers that we were introduced in the first book, but now we are treaty situation with the flyers, who we also are expected to remember their names to, as well as the name of their griffins, as well as the name of the dragons of all the writers. I'm sorry if you were to tell me to name anyone's dragon other than Sigale, Tarn, and Andarna, I wouldn't have been able to do it. You're not doing your reader any service. Aside from character names, I was also having a really hard time remembering names of territories and what they mean in correlation with Xaden and Violet. Obviously, I know Tyrandor, I know Navarre. That was and Port Emil. Those are about the extent of what I was remembering. Half the book, they were flying to different isles outside of the like border of magic, who were all the isles were like dedicated to a certain god, which felt completely useless. Nothing was explained properly, and so it left readers very confused on what was actually going on. That's just one of the grievances that I had, but the plot was worse. This book was like, I think over 500 pages, and we ended the book in the same position that we started. Okay, Iron Flame ended with Xaden being a villain and Violet wanting to find a cure to save him. That's exactly how we ended in Onyx Storm. There was no progression in the plot whatsoever. Obviously, at the end of Iron Flame, there are a lot of plot lines that we're picking up on. For example, you know, Andarna being the 7th dragon, we're looking to see if we can find the 7th breed. Maybe they could be the cure for the venom. We're picking up, you know, Xaden is venom. Violet's mother's death. You know, how do we move forward after the general is dead? So there were a lot of plot lines I thought we were going to maybe tie up at the end or in the middle of Onyx Storm. They were all left open-ended, obviously, because like, why would we tie up plot lines and then completely add on like 14 million other ones on top of that? Obviously, that's the way to write a book. The entire time I was reading this book, I had this sense of like impending doom. Obviously, we did not start off in a good spot. Xaden is losing his soul. We don't know the cure. You know, leadership is still pushing back, trying to like separate Xaden and Violet. It kind of felt like we were waiting for the shoe to drop. And that's exactly how Xaden and Violet were feeling throughout the whole book. I cannot tell you how many times they had the same conversation over and over again. So it was either they were concerned or scared that they were going to hurt each other due to the venom of it all, or they wanted to smash, and that was kind of the extent of their whole relationship the whole book. There was absolutely no relationship progression. As we saw at the end of Iron Flame, or even in the middle of Iron Flame, Xaden and Violet have a huge miscommunication issue. Xaden's keeping secrets. Violet's like, I need you to tell me everything that's ever happened to you ever in your life. Like, they were really at odds with each other. Thank God Onyx Storm was not a miscommunication trope. It was just like repetitive beating a dead horse with the same conversation kind of trope, okay? And I felt like now that we kind of got over the, you know, the secrets that Xaden was holding, and Xaden was like starting to kind of open up a little bit more, I feel like this was a really good opportunity to maybe grow Xaden and Violet's relationship emotionally. We know that they have a very physical attraction to each other and they act on it frequently, but for the most part, we haven't seen any of them get really vulnerable except for like about their feelings for each other. For example, this one really bugged me, and I think that Rebecca could have done something really great with this, and unfortunately she just dropped the ball. Throughout the entire book, you see Violet pushing down the grief that she's trying to keep at bay for the death of her mother. And I thought, you know, perhaps we were going to address that at some point. At some point she was going to break and finally address like what her mother did for her and her family and for their territory, yada yada yada. And it did seem as if it was going to head that way. It never did. And there was a point in the book where they're flying through the aisles and Xaden gets confronted with his mother. And if you don't recall about his mother, at some point Xaden did explain to Violet that his mother was married to his father under contract. She literally was meant to have a child with Xaden's dad, aka Xaden, so that he can have an heir, and then after a certain amount of years she can just leave if she wants to. And that's exactly what she did, and left Xaden behind, which that was part of her contract, but she also left her son. So obviously Xaden has very much mommy issues, abandonment issues, yada yada yada. And so he gets confronted with his mother randomly on this aisle. His mother is remarried, and then you later find out that he also has 2 half-brothers who he never got to meet. But that whole portion of him being in the home of his mother just felt very off, but you could see that he was visibly upset, and I thought this would have been a perfect opportunity for Xaden to get vulnerable and talk about his childhood and how much it hurt that his mother left him and all these things, and it would have prompted Violet to talk about the grief of her mother dying. There was a singular sentence that addressed that, and then they moved on. But I felt like that could have been a perfect opportunity for them to expand their emotional relationship, because at the end of the day, they might love each other, but they're so surface level. In book 1, all they're doing is fighting their physical attraction for each other as well as their bonded dragon situation. In Iron Flame, they're barely together for half of the book, and then when they are, Xaden's lying to her and keeping secrets and letting her know that he's lying and keeping secrets. So it's hard for them to trust each other. But now in Onyx Storm, they're at a point where they're comfortable and they're being more open with things and things like that. So it could have been a perfect opportunity for them to have a deeper conversation and also open up the door to hear about Xaden's childhood. Also throughout this book, we see that Violet is reconnecting with her dead father through riddles and journals and books that he has left for her, specifically out of all their children, specifically to Violet, because he knows that she will be able to figure out the bits and pieces that he kind of put together. Potentially maybe a cure for the venom. We don't really know yet. It didn't go into much detail. Or maybe about the 7th breed, yada, yada, yada. And I feel like Rebecca very much skimmed over that whole pretty emotional plot line. Like, her father died when she was pretty young, and it's obvious that she was very close with her father, and I felt like that could have been a way for Violet to kind of open up about her childhood and talk about the grief that she went through when she lost her father, as well as, you know, when she thought Brendan was dead. It was a terrible time for her. She lost her brother and her father all on the same day. And so it could have been an opportunity for her to also get deep. So there were two opportunities where Violet could have gone deeper and Xaden could have gotten deeper, and it was just swept under the rug. By the way, you would think that Xaden seeing his mother again would have been it was kind of a cliffhanger and kind of like a shock plot twist situation, but they just leave the aisle and it's never spoken of again. Maybe she'll come back, but it just felt very like, okay, bye. And it's like you made this whole big ordeal about it being his mother and then not doing anything else about it. It just felt odd and weird and messy. Once again, a plot line that was not tied up. Another thing that was very weird about this book was that we barely saw any of Violet's squad. The only person that we really got to connect with outside of like Xaden and Garrick and Mira was Ridoc. But Rhiannon is supposed to be Violet's best friend, and yet we never see her. Like, at some point I literally forgot that she existed. But then at the end of the book, in the middle of the climax of the final battle, we get a random chapter in Rhiannon's POV that added absolutely nothing to the plot. Also, it was very, very difficult to keep up and understand what was going on in her chapter because all she was doing was flying and doing maneuvers on her dragon, and it's hard for me to picture these said maneuvers that these people are doing on the dragons. It goes beyond my imagination, I think, or maybe it's just the way she's describing it. It doesn't make sense. So not only did we get a POV from Rhiannon, we also got a POV from Imogen, who we also have barely seen this entire book. The whole purpose of her POV was for her to see the death of her best friend Quinn. Now, if you remember Quinn, good for you. Very minimal side character who was introduced in Fourth Wing, but Quinn is Imogen's best friend and she dies, and that was the extent of her POV. It did not make sense. It was also in the middle of Violet being this close to dying. It threw off the momentum of the final battle scene. Like, it just didn't make sense that these two randomly got a POV and it did nothing to the plot other than give us a character death about a character no one cared about. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember in the promotions for this book, there was a lot of jibber jabber about how we were going to see character deaths that were going to hurt. Rebecca, which ones were you talking about? Because from what I remember, there was one death of a flyer who genuinely could not remember if he was even introduced in Iron Flame or not, and then Quinn, who had basically no character development at all. Like, she killed off two characters that have never contributed anything to the plot and then expected us to be sad. I understand we're in war times and people have to die, and I understand that, you know, a character death would add a little spice to, you know, the plot, but it has to be somebody substantial. And it just wasn't. This whole book was just giving us the runaround. We didn't find anything, not anything remotely close to finding a cure to the venom situation. We did find the 7th breed. They literally got Violet's guts, and then Anne Darnett ended up leaving. randomly. That was a very interesting development that went nowhere. The only two characters that had any progression at all were Ridoc and Aaric. We'd see this go around. Ridoc kind of stepped up and was like training, and he actually learned how to freeze venom from the inside out, which was so hot, by the way. Like he ended up being a really important ally in keeping Xaden's secret about being venom. So he was the star of the show. He should have had more screen time. And then there was Aaric, who he actually like revealed himself as the prince and was the like royal ambassador for them when they were traveling to the Isles. And then you find out that he has the signet of like foresight. So he basically can see the future, which is going to be obviously very useful, thank God. And he actually helped a lot of things towards the end with that signet. So those are the two characters that actually had a decent progression and a decent upgrade, I would say, and you got to go a little bit deeper into their character, which was sweet. Now I want to talk about the romance. I kind of talked about this already, but I want to just put it in its own category. The romance was bland, bland, bland. Xaden and Violet did not progress at all. Unfortunately, I was finding the same old routine of Xaden being overly possessive, even though he has graduated already and they have already claimed they are the literal loves of their lives and could not see a world in which both of them cannot be together. So I'm not understanding where the insecurity of her getting with other men is coming from Xaden. So it doesn't make sense. But once again, they don't emotionally connect. So that also could lead to the insecurity that Xaden's feeling. It just felt very cheap. It felt like Rebecca was taking cheap shots that made sense in the beginning. It made sense in Iron Flame, and it made sense in Fourth Wing that Xaden was so possessive because they weren't together, or if they were broken up, or you know what I mean? Like they had these moments where they weren't together, so it made sense that Xaden was possessive, and it was like attractive, and you liked to see it as a reader. But now that they're like completely established, it just felt cringy and childish and just like overdone. Let's go to the end of the book. The way the book ends is that Xaden goes fully venom. So this whole time, Xaden is partially venom. And honestly, it doesn't even feel like a threat when you're reading it because we're in Violet's POV, so we're just like, oh, if he stays in control, he'll be totally fine. Like, there's no problem. He's totally fine. So he goes fully venom, and obviously it was foreshadowed heavily in every conversation she had with him. So we knew that was gonna happen. And then it like does a little time skip, and like Violet is disoriented. She's going back into the castle of Tyrandor, and Brennan's like, where have you been? It's been 12 hours. And she's like, what do you mean? Basically at the end, after Xaden has turned completely venom, he marries Violet so that she can be the leader of Tyrandor. She gets his territory, and then you find out Imogen has erased her memory, so she has no idea what actually happened. Somebody turned venom with Xaden, and he was very frustrated about it, and it only makes sense that it was Bodhi, because why would he marry Violet and give her the territory if Bodhi was not available? Or if Bodhi was available. That's all I'm gonna say about that. The thing is, this was not a shock at all due to the excessive and blatantly obvious foreshadowing that Rebecca did about Xaden and Violet being married. There were multiple times where they had to play consort at these little isles. So that was one thing. People kept calling her his consort. And when he goes to visit the Isle with his mother, they keep trying to push Xaden into marrying Kat for a political alliance, and then they could get married for like 3 years, divorce, whatever, and he can be with whoever he wants. And he made it very blatantly clear that he was only going to be marrying Violet, and that Violet was the only thing that he chose for himself. So due to the excessive foreshadowing, the marriage between Xaden and Violet did not feel like a punch or a plot twist or like a moment, because it was so blatantly obvious that it was going to happen. Like, give the reader a little suspense. Like, maybe like keep it completely in the dark and then boom, that's my wife. Like, that would have been nice. But unfortunately it didn't go that way, so the whole ending just felt completely flat. In conclusion, if I had to wrap up my thoughts about this book in a singular word, I would say the word would be messy. The writing was messy, the plot was messy, the dialogue was messy, the progression and all relationships were messy. It was just messy. The writing was so messy that sometimes like plot lines were incomprehensible. I thought my brain was stupid reading it because I was unable to comprehend anything on the page, and unfortunately it seems like everyone was also feeling the same. It's blatantly obvious that this was supposed to be a 3-book series that's being stretched into 5, and the quality of the content is actually going down. The only saving grace that I have for this series is that I'm hoping that the 4th book will really take a turn as far as the plot goes. I hope that it will be dual POV so that we can, because now that Xaden and Violet are separated, it would totally make sense for us to be in Xaden's POV and Violet's POV. So I'm really hoping that maybe this next book will redeem what we've read thus far, because Iron Flame was a hot mess and now Onyx Storm is a hot mess, and it's clear that she's spitting these books out way too fast. She needs to take a break, and I saw somewhere that she is going to be taking a little bit longer with the 4th book, which I totally agree with. I don't want to see me end up hating this series because I do love these characters so much. So we'll see. Maybe this next book will be the turnaround. Who knows? Well guys, I'm so sorry for the rant I just slapped on you, but I've been holding this in, like I said, for a week now, and unfortunately me waiting has only fueled the fire. But a good note about Onyx Storm is that, oh my gosh, the Amazon cover is gorgeous. Like, is this just like not the pretty, oh, okay, is this not just the prettiest thing you've ever seen? Like, these sprayed edges are so gorge. Well guys, thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe gave you some insight or things to think about after you read Onyx Storm, or if you're thinking on the fence about reading Onyx Storm, maybe this will be helpful. I don't know. But yeah, thanks so much, and I'm thankful for all the support, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't mind. Bye guys.